He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
This is The Alex Marlow Show. I'm glad you're here, and I will tell you about my funky shot and my funky setup in a second. But before we do that, I want to start things off on a somewhat somber note. 3 weeks ago, my friend Charlie Kirk was supposed to be the one reading this to you. Just 2 days before he was assassinated, he decided to support an explosive new documentary. His death and the violent attacks on churches and schools remind us that we are in a real spiritual battle. But there is hope. Church attendance is rising, especially among young people. And for that hope to last, we need generational change. That's why Charlie wanted you to see Off-School Property in theaters October 23rd. The film tells the story of LifeWise, a nonprofit bringing Bible classes to public school students during the school day. Charlie was excited about this mission. Now it's up to us to carry it forward. Take your family and friends to see Off-School Property in theaters nationwide October 23rd. Find theaters near you at lifewise.org/Alex Marlow. That's lifewise.org/Alex Marlow. So we got a good show today because we're kind of going to catch up on things, tell some personal stuff, catch up on the news. But I have a funky shot today because there are a couple alternatives here because I'm in the hotel room in Washington, D.C. It was sometimes I think about this when I do some travel, when I am trying to get when I'm on the road, I try to make sure that I've got a good, clean shot for all of you if I have to podcast, or I try to bank the podcast ahead of time. But in this instance, I did not plan perfectly, but I'll tell you, there's a silver line to this. And it's not that I'm having a good hair day, which is true. But today I went to the White House for a couple of interviews, but only one of them panned out. So I thought I would have a show today with Kevin Hassett and a show tomorrow with Tom Homan. Kevin Hassett runs the Economic Council for Trump, but he got busy at the last second. But I did get the Tom Homan show in the bank. So that is going to be tomorrow's show. And I got to tell you guys, it's arguably the most important interview I've done. Talking to President Trump on when he was candidate Trump on Election Day 2016 is kind of up there. Pretty high. I've had some good ones. I've had some good ones over my long career. Probably done 1,000 interviews, I would say, about right in my life. But this one it's special. You really get to know him. You really get to know Trump's borders are as a person. I start out with a series of personal questions about why he does the things that he does, what motivates him, what are the stories, what are the incidents that have been most influential on him throughout his time in 40 years in law enforcement. Then we get into data, then we get into strategy, and we get into his metrics for what a victory would mean for him in his crusade to try to secure our border, why he thinks it matters. This has been my number one issue since I really became editor-in-chief of Breitbart. I would say just general hatred of the left and the media was my original number one issue, but it became the border, it really did. The border is what it's all about. I think it ruined my home state of California, the insistence that we leave our border open. And there's one guy fighting back against it better than anyone else, and that's Tom Homan. And he's going to be here tomorrow for the whole show. So you guys are going to love it. You're going to absolutely love it. And the timing is very good because the attacks on ICE are increasing. And you see people in the establishment media making excuses for Antifa. And I'll tell you something. Here's a spoiler for you. I asked him about Antifa, and I asked him if Antifa is real, and I asked him about the organization of it and whether or not he thinks it's just one-off, just individuals. And he says, no, of course not. Of course this is organized. And he says he's looking into the funding. And I'm going to discuss that also momentarily. But I will say, just to finish out my thought on my shot here, the alternatives is that I could show you. I'm tempted to show you. So I could have better lighting. I will show you. I don't know why not. This is fun. If I tilt it so you get better lighting, then all of a sudden you're looking in my closet, and then you're going to see my dirty clothes, because this is one of those modern hotels where they don't have a door to the closet for something. It's very stylish, and when you're by yourself, as I am this week, it works out okay. But it makes it so that I cannot get good lighting, because the natural light, the natural afternoon light, is coming in and bathing me from this side. I'd rather be in my face, but it's not gonna happen today. So let's get in the news here, because it's mostly an audio show. Is it? It's a video show and an audio show. But we're seeing a lot of people on the left try to make excuses for Antifa because they have to explain away the violence. They have to make it seem like it's not coordinated assassinated, which it is, and I will give you evidence that it is. But first, let me give you a taste of how the left is discussing it. This is CNN's Erin Burnett, who is not one of their most radical people. Check this out.
And Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security actually took that further.
This network of Antifa is just as sophisticated as MS-13, as TDA, as ISIS, as Hezbollah, as Hamas, as all of them. They are just as dangerous.
That's pretty incredible, right? Hamas has just been engaged in a 2-year war that we just announced the first stage of a peace plan to a few moments ago. And ISIS? These are incredible things to say. And obviously, I'm not going to sit here and defend anybody who considers themselves part of an Antifa movement, such that it is. But such that it is the operative part of that sentence. Antifa is far from a major sophisticated terror organization like Hezbollah, Hamas, or ISIS. In fact, it's not even like far-right groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, which have had national leaders, unlike Antifa. There is no organized hierarchy to the group, and according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-linked violence is rare and limited.
One of the things that I asked Tom Homan about, that you'll get this answer tomorrow, we'll give you the exact answer, but I asked him of all the death threats that are happening to him, where are they coming from? Are they coming from foreigners, or are they coming from Americans? And I'll withhold the answer. You can guess what it would be. It is the answer you would guess. But it's just noteworthy that a lot of people, and I'm very much for having a robust defense. I'm for trying to do what we can to bring about Middle East peace, and I'll comment on that momentarily quite a bit. But overall, we got to remember that Antifa and domestic extremism, far left secular extremism, is what killed my friend Charlie Kirk. And it's also one of the things that is attacking ICE agents on a daily basis, making incredibly dangerous. So let's not act as though that we should not consider Antifa equally as bad. Maybe they're not quite as organized yet, but they're very organized. And why CNN wants to take airtime, especially when they have low-rated shows like Erin Burnett's show, and take low-rated airtime, try to minimize Antifa. It seems like we have very limited airtime on these shows. She has an hour a day, I think, for her show, and just the thought that you would want to dedicate any time whatsoever to minimizing Antifa at a moment where we just, a month ago, I think it was 4 weeks today, that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by a guy who had written "Hey Fascist, Catch" on a bullet. Unbelievable. On a bullet casing. I'm going to be specific for you guys. I got one more Burnett. Let's play this.
In fact, it's not even like far-right groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, which have had national leaders, unlike Antifa. There is no organized hierarchy to the group, and according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-linked violence is rare and limited. But that has not stopped Trump from blaming Antifa for just about every act of violence in America since he first got into office.
So it's not even as bad as the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers? What are the high-profile assassinations from the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, Erin? I feel like doing the goose meme online where the goose chases after you and asks you a super obvious question that you won't answer. Does she have an example? This is the problem with when you put irresponsible liars up as show hosts. When you put an irresponsible liar up as a show host, as they do on CNN, then there's no one on that panel who could push back. And even, the Thunderdome panel that my friend Scott Jennings does, I mean, it's like he could, if the host said that, if Abby Phillips said that on that show, then he could just say, well, but what about Charlie? But no one can say that on that network. It's very irresponsible, or on that show specifically. So I will say that we are starting to piece together who is funding Antifa, and my friend Seamus Bruner has taken the lead on this. We'll get him on the show. He's a good friend. He works for Peter Schweitzer. He's the head of research at the Government Accountability Institute, and he was part of this Antifa panel that was convened by the White House with some of the cabinet secretaries yesterday as we're recording this, which was really terrific. Andy Ngo was there, who I ran into. Savannah Hernandez was there from Frontlines, the Turning Point project they do. So some really great people. Julio Rosas, who does great journalism online. A lot of cool people were there and telling their stories about Antifa violence. Nick Sortor, I think, was there, who was the one who had been attacked just earlier in the week. And so this is one of these things where it's very important that the White House focuses on this, because this is the real domestic extremism that is a major threat to us at this time. But I'll tell you what I do think, and I'm a little bit biased here because Seamus is a friend and I love everything that Peter and GAI do. But this is what I felt was the most important part of the day. Listen to this.
That this is not just a story about violence and chaos, as you alluded to, Mr. President. This is a money story And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the protest industrial complex, Riot Inc. And we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network, it's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash. And it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem. And so I want to share 3 money facts with you about what we call Riot Inc. Number one, like any corporation, Riot Inc. has many divisions. It doesn't just have the Antifa boots on the ground division. It has PR divisions. It has marketing divisions. It has a very well-funded legal division to get these boots on the ground back on the streets as quickly as possible. But it does have those investors that I mentioned. Number two.
So I just want to pause and mention a couple of the investors here because this is a crucial point. And so George Soros, Arabella Funding Network, which is the big dark money, network that all the major left-wing billionaires donate to. The Tides Foundation, which was originally associated with Soros, but all these other billionaires jumped in on that. Neville Roy Singham, who we've been profiling a lot at Breitbart News, who is married to one of the co-founders of Code Pink. And we just had a big story on this, how the Chinese government records list left-wing billionaire Neville Roy Singham as a corporate officer for his ThoughtWorks in Beijing. And so this is a tech billionaire, Chicago-based entrepreneur, but he was a Shanghai resident, and he's also known as for his Jody Evans, his wife, who's a co-founder of Code Pink, donating tens of millions of dollars to far left causes and associations with China as well. And he made all this money and he's using it for ill. And I don't think a lot of people have heard his name. And we just had a big report on it at the Breitbart News Foundation, which is where we're housing some of our investigative research, some of our more our deep dive content that we've got. So those of you who have not checked out the Breitbart News Foundation, you can find it on our website, pretty easy to find. But that's where we're doing some of our deep investigations. We were just looking into this guy, and then Seamus is up there, and I didn't coordinate with Seamus on this at all. And he throws out Neville Roy Singham's network as perhaps funding Antifa, which is unbelievable. Hans-Jörg Wyss is a billionaire Swiss guy. He's not even American. And he's shown up in multiples of my books for funding far left endeavors. And there's other foreign cash that's coming in. So just know that there are foreigners who are putting their money into the United States of America, not to help America, but to undermine America and to fund the paratroopers for the Marxist left, which is Antifa. So it's just amazing. I'm really glad that Seamus laid this out. And these are not names that should be entirely unfamiliar to people in this audience. Some of them are certainly familiar to you. But if you're listening to a show like mine or watching a show like mine, then I'm sure you've heard most of these names at least once. But it's important to put markers down that these are the people who are behind it and to act as though it's just some random people, which CNN has attempted to do from the very beginning. And Chris Cuomo is one of the worst at this, by the way. Even though he's kind of less annoying, I guess, now than he used to be. But they were way out of their way to act as though the Antifa is no organization whatsoever, despite massive amounts of evidence to the contrary and money to the contrary. And I get into this with Tom Homan tomorrow, and you'll get his take. So you got to come back and check it out. Okay, let's do some more.
Number two, we have identified dozens of radical organizations, not just the decentralized Antifa organizations, but dozens of radical organizations that have received more than $100 million from the Riot Inc. investors. These would be the lawyer groups. These would be the groups that advocate for calling good, honest Americans fascists, etc. And then three, I think the most shocking thing is that we have found that more than $100 million in U.S. taxpayer funding has flowed into these funding networks, including at least $4 million to these very groups themselves, not just Antifa types, but there was an event in Atlanta called Stop Cop City. Over 60 rioters were charged with domestic terrorism. These groups received money for that from both the billionaire class as well as taxpayer money. So one other thing, this money helps fund the decentralized crowdfunding platforms. These are ways that...
Those of you who are missing the optics of this, you've got Stephen Miller, Caroline Leavitt, Susie Wiles, who's chief of staff, Pam Bondi, President Trump, Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kash Patel. It looks like Scott Bessent there as well, and they're all, even though I can't see for sure if that's Bessent in the corner, but they're all just sitting there and they're taking this all in. And this is so terrific to give this information straight away to the president that these are the bad guys. These are the people who are trying to fund the destruction of our country. And even though on you tune on cable news, they might either have not investigated this stuff or they might be telling you this stuff is not happening, but it very much is. And here's the evidence.
These are ways that Antifa, the John Brown Gun Club of Elm Fork, which had links to that attack on the ICE facility, the Socialist Rifle Association, and just because they don't have LLCs or EIN numbers doesn't mean they can't get paid. Some of these funding platforms, crowdfunding platforms, are funded by this network that we call Riot.
Such an important point is that one of the technicalities that the left relies on is they act as though, well, if it's not on paper, if it's not fully documented, and then that we're assuming some level of transparency that's just not real. So we don't get the criminals or people who are funding criminal enterprises just putting their hand up and putting it on paper that they're funding a criminal enterprise. You're not putting your criminal enterprise on an LLC. You hide the money in various ways. So that's why you got to follow it. You got to be careful, meticulous the way you do it. But if they're committed to committing crimes, if they're bought in on it, then of course that they're going to do what they can to cover their own behinds. So, but the left will never tell you that because that's inconvenient to them.
Again, I want to thank you for your leadership, for the whole cabinet's leadership on this. We're going to keep following the money and appreciate everything you're doing, sir.
Do you know the name of any of the funders? Do you know the names? Because if you do, I'd like you to give them to Cash or Pam.
Absolutely.
Or Christy.
Yeah, we'll do that.
As soon as you can. That's all of you. Because you probably know the names after a certain period of time. You tend to find out. But these are people that do not have good intention for the country, and that's treasonous probably. So if you could, very important, if you could do that, it would be great. Nobody would know better than you. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I talked to Tom Homan again about this, and Homan's on it. He's got names. I won't tell you whether or not he reveals some of them tomorrow, but you'll have to check it out. And it just reminds me, those Burnett clips just reminds me of how we got to push hard. We got to push hard to try to make sure that we get transparency and accountability when it comes to the Antifa funding, because they're not just showing up. They're getting paid. Who's paying them? Who's paying for the gear? And who wants to destroy this country the most? Because that's what they're here to do. They're here to hurt and harm law enforcement, to discourage them, to diminish them, and to try to make it so that our borders remain open, which is their current project, to keep our borders open. And people are lying about them all the time. All right. One other thing that I got to do in D.C. yesterday was I was going to be in studio with Laura Ingraham on Fox, and I'm going to play the clip of how the interview went, but I'll tell you some of the background. So first of all, I almost never go into studio when I go to Fox. Sometimes I go in LA because they like me better than the Vans do, so I look a little better. And it was very, I was in DC and I went into studio, and it was really more intense, and there's a lot more interesting people coming into the green room, and then people like Judge Jeanine comes in. Everyone treats her like, it's Beyonce coming in, which is pretty funny. And just people like that, just walking around. You get to say hi to certain people who you haven't bumped into in a while. It's always nice to see Laura, who I don't see in person very often. And it's very funny because she starts immediately analyzing everything. Like she said, I look way more manly in person, which was nice, but then she made fun of my shoes and saying that I'm manly in person. Does that mean I don't look as manly when I'm in the van? So it's all fun and we're having a good time. But the topic of conversation was supposed to be this. It was supposed to be crime. It was supposed to be, the Antifa panel that was going on, and Andy Ngo and Savannah Hernandez, who were there, they were there right before me, and they were going to speak, and then I was going to come in and kind of go big picture about the crime apparatus and some of the themes of breaking the law, my New York Times bestselling book that's out, where I talk about it really is cultural that the left has turned on law and order, and they don't believe in law and order as a value. And this has been a project that's been going on for decades, and it's kind of building up to this assassination moment. And that was kind of all the stuff I'd prepared. I was going to go through all that and things that you've heard in this audience, but hopefully in a more distilled and effective way. But then I learned via a Fox News alert at the top of the show that Donald Trump has forged a peace deal He's forged it. Yes, Middle East peace is coming. After my entire life, I mean, the cliche is there's always war in the Middle East. And now all of a sudden, Trump has maybe forged the deal. In the deal terms I went through on the show a couple of days ago, and I've got a little snippet on X, the Everything app, if you want to scroll down a few posts where I go through all the basics of it. And I have the basics of the deal down correct. But basically, the framework is it starts with the hostages need to come back. There was 20 odd hostages who were alive and others who were dead. They all need to come back to Israel. Israel's going to let some Hamas prisoners out. It's hundreds of them. So maybe even thousands, or not thousands, but maybe even over 1,000. And there's going to be some bad hombres in this group. So we have to keep an eye on these people, but that's the nature of these things. War's a messy business. You swap them out. And then if all the other nations are on board and even Palestinian officials are on board, then Hamas is going to basically no choice but to stop, to disarm to a degree. They won't disarm entirely because then they'll feel too vulnerable. They can't protect themselves. But basically a commitment that they're not going to proactively attack Israel anymore. Israel's going to get the hostages, and thus Israel is going to have Hamas's main leverage over Israel is gone. Those are the basic terms of the deal. So the prisoner swap takes place. Israel withdraws from Gaza. Hamas disarms for the most part. And then we start this massive international rebuilding effort. That's kind of how I summed it up. And that's basically the terms of phase one of the deal. There's a lot of work to do. It's great news. This is fantastic news. It's world-changing news. But here's the fun part that I'll clue you in on, in specifically the Alex Marlowe show audience. I got to give the first opinion on Fox News about this, which is funny because people who have tracked my relationship with Fox over the years, I wouldn't say I'm a frequent guest over the years, but lately I've been on more, and then occasionally you fall into favor and out of favor. But it just so happened that I was there to talk about crime, and I was the next guest up when the news broke. And they had this report from Jennifer Griffin, who's their famed international reporter from Tel Aviv. She walks through what she knows about the deal. And then they throw it to me, and I get to give the first opinion. And this is what we call raw dogging it. No prep, throw it to me. Let's see how I did. Here we go.
And here to react, Alex Marlowe, Breitbart editor-in-chief. All right, Alex, if Donald Trump doesn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, the committee should disband.
Oh, absolutely. This is a historic achievement. He's taken away all of Hamas's leverage over Israel. It's gone now. The hostages were the leverage. If they're coming home, we're going to have a celebration, but it also could be the end of Hamas as a military power in the region. This could be the beginning of lasting peace in the region, God willing. Well, again, this was a 2-year nightmare for the Israeli families that had to endure this. And I had tried to put it out of my mind what Hamas did on October 7th. But if anyone out there is not familiar with what Hamas did to innocents on the ground and the torturing of children and women and rapes in front of husbands, then the gutting of people in front of their spouses, that's what these people had to endure. And I know a lot of criticism heaped on Israel. And
first of all, it's interesting that she went straight to the Peace Prize, which of course Trump should get. And remember, today I think is the anniversary in 2009 where Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize simply for breathing, simply for existing. So it's pretty unbelievable that almost exactly on the anniversary of that, we get an announcement of historic peace. So if this is a fraction of as peaceful as our highest hopes, then Trump, of course, should get it, or else the Peace Prize doesn't mean anything. But I don't know if it means anything anyway. But if Trump's incentivized to bring peace so we can get an award, then cool, let's do it. And so I think the Nobel organization can really save some face if they do this. But I love where she takes it, where we cannot forget, and my mind goes to a very similar place, is that sometimes you take the victory and then you forget about the battle that took place and really the nature of it, the brutality of it. We cannot make that mistake. And I feel like we do this on a micro level, a lot of crises. Domestically, I think about this a lot with Butler, how we still don't have answers for Butler. We certainly don't have all the answers for Charlie Kirk's assassination. And we got to keep asking questions about the nature of these things and not forget it just because, well, we dodged that bullet in Butler, literally and figuratively. But we still don't know enough about it. And there's rarely are there any new details unearthed. And I don't find that to be acceptable. So, all right, let's see where we go next.
And I'm sure there were some excesses here. I mean, I'm sure there were. That's what war is. It's filled with excesses. But this has been a living nightmare, and the people of Gaza have also suffered. Without a doubt, they've suffered through this. This had to end.
Yeah, Israel's counteroffensive was highly effective, and it was going to continue so long as those hostages were there. So now there is hope that they don't have to press the way they had to in order to, I would say, decimate Hamas and avenge some of those deaths that were, again, I think we really gloss over how horrible October the 7th was. We've moved on way too quickly, and I'm very eager to hear the stories of some of these hostages. Hopefully they'll be healthy enough to tell them, because I want to hear about the atrocities that Hamas committed.
I had a chance with friends who were hosting some of the hostages in the United States to talk to them. Now, they didn't want to share, and they had broken legs and broken arms, never properly set in captivity. And one was a young woman, and she was very...
I'll just tell you right now, when I'm in the hot seat, I'm feeling good, because I had no idea that she'd spoken to the hostages. And this is great, because I just threw her an opportunity to talk about something where she had deep inside knowledge. So as a guest, I feel like I would just throw in an alley-oop to the star power forward here. So let's see what happens.
She was very recalcitrant about speaking about what happened because of the other hostages there. In fact, they said to her, if you tell what you know, all of what you know, expect the remaining hostages to be tortured. And so they didn't tell, a lot of them didn't tell their full story, because they were told that before they were released.
Yeah, and we cannot forget those things. We need all the details. We need a full accounting so that everyone understands Hamas's atrocities before we forget. But then we get to do this amazing thing where we get to move on and build this economic coalition that was out there. Let's get Gazalago going, and let's build. Donald Trump's
we need peace and prosperity. Everything is so negative all the time.
Yes.
It's war. It's strife in Portland. It's the anti-ICE rhetoric. It's the you're a Nazi.
Yes.
He's a Nazi. It's all of that. It's peace and prosperity time. That's what it should be for the Middle East.
We're getting the peace going. That was a war that wouldn't have happened if not for Joe Biden's irresponsible policies in the region. And now Donald Trump can help build it back up with a growing coalition of those Abraham Accord nations.
How about his staff, though? He pulls in. They had Tony Blinken. God bless him, but that just was a disaster. So they had Tony Blinken. They had John Kerry. I forgot about John Kerry. He has Kushner and Witkoff. Witkoff's never done this. He's like a business guy. He comes in, he's like bringing home hostages. Trump's, hosting him. And then Kushner comes back in from his business world, and he's like, let's get this done.
I think Donald Trump,
it's amazing.
Of everything he's done, I think arguably his foreign policy has been his strongest part of his portfolio. Coming in with no foreign policy background, he's somehow the best person in American modern history of foreign policy.
That's why the establishment really hates him, right? Because he's exposed their incompetence. Alex, we're going to have you on about another topic, but you moved right in. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Laura.
See that? We didn't know. We didn't know what I was talking about. That felt good. That was great. I hadn't watched it back. That actually was a little better than I even recall at the time. But it's, I have an article. I should X this for you guys so you could see it. But this is October 9th, 2023, which is exactly today, exactly 2 years ago today as I'm recording. I wrote an article. Joe Biden's failures in the region were just myriad, from all of those weapons that were left in Afghanistan during the botched Afghanistan withdrawal that we had, to being a weak ally of Israel in general, which I think gave the green light for terror. And he increasingly cozying up to Hamas. He even had a statement from the Pentagon, which was later retracted right after the Hamas terror attacks of October the 7th, that it was Israelis who need to refrain from response. It was all horrible. And I break it all down in that piece that I'll try to link up for all of you. But it really does, Biden does bear a lot of the responsibility. But I did want to spend more time in the segment talking about, again, this is a historic accomplishment for President Trump, maybe the most significant, peaceful moment in the century, perhaps. And now we get the chance to build, and that's what Trump does best, and that's what I would say I'm most excited about. I'm also excited about when it's fun when I get the opportunity to share that with an audience. All right, but that's not the only thing I've been doing in Washington. I just came from a meeting at the Italian embassy, and it was interesting because the first thing that I spoke to the spokesperson for the ambassador. Initially, I was hoping to meet with the ambassador, but that didn't work out scheduling-wise. But I spoke to the top communications officer in the Italian embassy here in D.C. And the first thing he wanted to bring up was Donald Trump signing a Columbus Day executive action. Check this out.
Today we have your Columbus Day proclamation for Monday, which we're signing a bit early. Christopher Columbus obviously discovered the New World in 1492. He was a great Italian explorer. He sailed his 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in what's today the Caribbean.
So Trump's peace deal is so awesome that even places like MSNBC have to doff their cap to him. Check out what happened on Morning Joe earlier today with David Ignatius, a classic establishment liberal reporter.
The deal that President Trump is announcing played a key part in negotiating. It is a significant change. This war was blocked for 2 years. President Biden, who preceded him, was unable to find a way to stop it. President Trump found that way by being tough on both sides, and he'll take a victory lap for sure over the next few days. But it's deserved. There's no way that I can see that this would have been done without Trump's pressure in the final hours.
It's right, because Trump was a tough but fair friend to Israel, and he was incredibly tough to all the bad guys in the region, allowing Israel to stand up to Hamas and showing them he means business, also bombing Iran proactively. It's just one of these things where Trump has been so tough. He's also unpredictable, but I would say consistent still. And that is something that makes him a very powerful negotiator. And that's not a joke. It's not just branding. He's a great negotiator. He is a legit great negotiator. And he's a great leader. It really is fantastic. We have some real leaders on our side, as opposed to the left, who does not have good leaders. One other thing I got to do while I was in D.C., I had a really long hit. I couldn't find any clips of it, but I was on Newsmax, Carl Higbee show. We talked a lot about Katie Porter, the California former congresswoman, who's going to be running for governor. I think she is running for governor now. I think she ran for Senate. She lost to that little pencil neck Adam Schiff. I think she got third place. I think Steve Garvey beat her too, who's a Republican. So she is getting a lot of heat for some of her commentary in the press lately. She walked out of an interview. I'm sure you all would have seen this, but for some reason, she decided she'd walk out of an interview. A reporter who's been talking to all the candidates asked her that are basically in a nutshell, it was not a great question. I will say this, but the reporter did ask in a nutshell, you want to be governor, but are you going to be governor for the 40% of people in the state who voted for President Trump? And she basically said, I don't need these people, or Katie Porter did. So, which is not unifying. It's not very classy. And then when the reporter followed up, Porter got up and left and said, well, I really want to have a nice interaction with you. And as if she's entitled to have just nice interactions with every journalist, every interview she wants to say. And she did not like that there were follow-ups, and she wanted her to stick to her script, which is amazingly arrogant. But that's the type of person Katie Porter is. And it's important to get the word out of who she is, because I would say I have a very negative reaction to her being the governor of a state where I'm going to have some really bad choices here for who's going to be governor. In all likelihood, it's still probably going to be a Democrat, as much as we're rooting on, the Steve Hiltons of the world. Whichever one of the Republicans want to give it a shot, but it's probably going to be a Democrat, and I would like it to be the least insane Democrat, and that's not Katie Porter. Check out some clips that I've got of her right now.
And the state could lose. Get out of my shot.
I wanted to tell you that that's actually incorrect. It's not that it's electric vehicles. It's that if we don't meet the commitments under the Paris climate.
So the guys trimmed this for me a little bit, but she's on some sort of a Zoom call or something, and she's rolling, and just mid-sentence, she interrupts herself to scream at an assistant who walks in behind her in the shot. And in the shot, she has a mask on for some reason. And then she just starts getting screamed at. I never talked to a subordinate like this. I've never talked to a family member like this. Could you imagine trying to be the leader of a state and this is your disposition towards your subordinates? The amount of entitlement and narcissism you have to have in order to talk to people like that. When she was coming in, she's trying to explain that she was wrong about something. So let's hear the rest of this.
Paris climate accord.
Okay, it does. Okay, you also were in my shot before that. Stay out of my shot. Okay, I'm going to start again with electric vehicles saving us money. Perfect.
Yeah, I don't think her marriage worked out also, which I just, I wonder why. And she's also one of these people who's constantly fear-mongering about people losing abortion access. She's always fear-mongering about climate change, things like that. Well, here's what she is not fear-mongering about.
This allegation of groomer and pedophile, it is alleging that a person is criminal somehow and engaged in criminal acts merely because of their identity, their sexual orientation, their gender identity.
So basically, if you're attracted to children, that shouldn't be considered a criminal. So, okay, like maybe on a technical level, but if you're a pedophile, then I mean, it does start with the fantasies about being with children, grooming children to have sex with them. So I would think that would be a big threat this day and age. And it seems like one where it seems pretty universal that people think that people who try to prey on children, that's a real problem. But hey, you know what? If she's into normalizing it, and that's her prerogative as a left-wing California person who's going to run to the left. It's just noteworthy because California, we just got a arrest for the alleged arsonist. And this raises real significant questions about the fire response in the state. And this guy, it looks like New York Post reported he was a Biden donor or something. So he might be a left-wing guy. He's an Uber driver, the 29-year-old guy, doesn't seem very impressive person and clearly harbored some violent fantasies of burning down the city. That seems to be apparent. But I'll tell you, let's not get too distracted by the guy and forget about the just incredible irresponsible nature of the city and state governments. That this was a smoldering fire that was put out on New Year's Day, and it did not, and even though there were clear warnings of high winds, I was preparing my family. We were thinking about whether or not we were going to have a situation because we were having these winds that do happen, where they're over 100 miles an hour in the state. They happen sometimes. We live in a neighborhood where I am, where we're very close to the edge of town, where there's a lot of brush, and not all of it's sufficiently cleared out. And you got to be prepared for this stuff because it really was a deep threat. And there was this smoldering fire that had ostensibly been put out days earlier, but hadn't fully been extinguished. And they did nothing about it. And Karen Bass, meanwhile, was in Africa, and the reservoirs were depleted, and not enough brush was cleared out. And California was a tinderbox. The Palisades was a tinderbox. So just note that. So maybe it was a left-wing guy who was an arsonist, but it's not just him who's to blame. Who's to blame is that the city was not prepared. The state was not prepared. Gavin Newsom is out there, and he is running for president, even after he made San Francisco worse. He made California worse. Can't solve any of our major problems. And he's the guy who wants to be president. In the meantime, we're getting the people like Katie Porter who calls pedophilia an identity. An identity, just an identity. That's all it is. Not a deep threat to children. It's an identity. So the left is completely lost. They're completely godless. They're completely leaderless. And they don't have any real potential, I think, to start putting the pieces back together anytime soon. Because think about who's the literal leader of the party. We're still in the middle of a government shutdown as we're having this conversation. This is what Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat minority leader, is saying these days.
Government open and then going into the normal appropriations process. I mean, there was an election, and the Republicans were put in a position where they were able to pass the big, beautiful bill, or you call it the big, ugly bill. To then say, we don't like any of that, so we're going to shut down the government until you take back all the things that you duly passed through legislation. If Republicans had tried to do that to the Inflation Reduction Act or the any of the acts that Biden and that administration have passed, if they said we're going to shut down the government because we don't like any of those things you did, we're going to not pay our military, we're going to, not allow the government to reopen until you do what we want. After an election where the American people put Democrats in power, you'd be going crazy. You'd be going crazy about using a shutdown of the government with a continuing resolution to get what you want just because you don't like what the Republicans did. It's not.
So this is Joe Kiernan on CNBC, and this is very not crisply delivered, but the content is very good. The content is exactly right, that if it was the Republicans who had lost the election and were in the triple minority, and the Democrats had suggested extending the Republican-passed budget from the prior administration for a few more weeks to negotiate the appropriations process, and the Republicans would not approve that, then of course they'd be getting absolutely crushed for this. That's the implication here. Let's see how Jeffries reacts to it.
It's not how it works. It's bad. It's bad precedent, and it's just clear. And you're talking about the House. You've already passed this. The Senate is who we're talking about, and they have a bill which will reopen the government right now with 5 more Democrats.
What is bad precedent is the Republican refusal to engage in bipartisan negotiations. What is bad precedent is the Republicans embarking on a my way or the highway approach from the very beginning of this Congress. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Joe, you're exactly right. So if the government shuts down, they've made the decision to shut the government down. And they can reopen it right now if they chose to. With a rule.
It's a very tough sell considering that the Republicans all voted to keep the government open and the Democrats did not.
With a rule change in the Senate. But I just explained it. The reality is they want to keep the government closed. Cruelty from the very beginning of this administration has been the point. And the responsible thing to do is to sit down and negotiate a bipartisan path forward to a...
This is just them holding us hostage, is that we're not going to pay our military because the Republicans won't do what the Democrat minority wants them to do, is not bipartisan. That's hostage taking, essentially. That's holding the whole government hostage because they feel like they can win a media battle and impress their base by suggesting that they're fighters. That's the whole nature of the whole Katie Porter thing, is that people like Katie Porter on the left because she comes off as a fighter, but she's not fighting for anything important. She's fighting for making sure pedophiles, I guess, are it's just merely their identity and they're not treated like criminals for whatever reason. That's what she's fighting for. She's fighting for abortions and to demonize climate change. She's not fighting to actually make life better for Californians. She's not fighting for fire safety. She's not fighting for reduced crime. She's not fighting for reduced taxes, so people have more money to spend. She's fighting for phantom issues.
To address a very real healthcare crisis that's upon us right now. Open enrollment starts on November 1st.
Can you do those negotiations while the government is reopened? I think that's the offer that's been on the table. We did hear the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, talking about how, look, he passed a clean CR. There's not really much for him to politic in because there's nothing to take out. Any Republican pork that they pushed into this to take out of it to offer as a way of getting around this. Can you reopen the government and have these conversations if there's a willing party on the other side, which it sounds like there is if you talk to some of the Republicans who see this as an issue in their district as well?
Well, certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene has made clear that it's a very real issue. It's an issue that Republicans have ignored throughout this year, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed right now. Mike Johnson has made the representation, including at that White House meeting that we had last week, after Chuck Schumer and I reached out to demand that we have the conversation. Unfortunately, it took place literally a day before the government shut down because Republicans have refused to engage in bipartisan negotiations.
She, by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene was blaming Mike Johnson and was blaming John Thune for the shutdown, which I don't think is very helpful. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I was in agreement with her that it was a mistake to push out Kevin McCarthy at the time. I think Mike Johnson's done a good job, and I'm hoping to connect with him, do an interview with him coming up here. So hopefully we'll have that in the show in the forthcoming way. And Johnson's, I think, done better than I'd anticipated, and I want to be fair and complimentary to him on that. And I don't hold this against him. But Greene is out there saying it's Johnson's fault. So, I mean, that's so long as she does that, then, you know, the Keem Jeffries of the world are going to use that to try to put the blame on Republicans, and then he gets away with stuff. Because here's the main thing from that long clip that I played. Is it, did you understand what he's asking for? Is he asking for anything that's coherent? Those are not sharp questions. I think that was Becky Quick was the woman who was asking the question. These are not sharp questions. They're not crisp. They're not articulated in a way where anyone's going to accomplish anything in those hits. But I will say that initially Joe Kernan laid out I think a pretty good, though not super crisp, but a pretty good case that it's really the Democrats' call to keep the government shut down. And what do you say about that? And he said, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene said it was Johnson's fault. So we don't know what he's asking for specifically. He just calls Republicans names. And I think that is what the base wants, which is noteworthy. That really is what is currency on the left at this time. So remember, they hate Trump so much that anything he does that's helpful to the country in general, even things that are helpful to citizens in left-wing areas in the country, it doesn't matter if Trump is for it, because if Trump is for it, they must be against it by the very nature of things. We had a story from John Nolte at Breitbart News today on how Brandon Johnson in Chicago said that he would not say, when asked, if he deports someone who raped his own wife, because he's so against deportations, because he thinks deportations represent fascism. They represent all the things that Trump stands for. And this is why the left is this cognitive dissonance, because there's no unity. There's no ability to agree. If Trump is for it, it must be wrong. And so long as they take that approach, it's going to be very hard to have even converse with one another. It's dangerous precedent. But that is what the left-wing base wants. They just want everyone to oppose Trump all the time. And so and this is going to involve them supporting pedophiles, supporting terror, supporting violence, supporting assassinations. That's what's going to happen if it's not already happening. So anyway, I just got word we should be getting these Hamas hostages hopefully Monday or Tuesday. That'd be great. So time it for the whole work week. J.D. Vance, I think, was talking about the shutdown. He was roasting Chuck Schumer today. There's a cabinet meeting today, which are always really exciting. I did not have time to pull clips. And we probably will get to them tomorrow. But those are always great. Those are always a blast because the cabinet's so sharp and fun. But here's something from J.D. Vance. Check this out.
And that's why we're here. It's because you did something different. And I think it's important to recognize that. I also think the president, Marco mentioned the president's personal touch being a big part of this. And the one thing I would say is obviously the president of the United States in New York.
Okay, so I introduced this clip incorrectly. This is about the peace deal, and I think you're going to like the joke that I think Vance is about to make.
New York real estate billionaire, one of the most famous New Yorkers in the world, has a lot of interaction with a lot of people who are very pro-Israel. I think that was an important set of experiences and life experiences that he brought to the table. He also, of course, knew one of the most famous Palestinians in the world, Chuck Schumer. And I think without that background of knowledge, it would have been impossible to get us to this. Second thing I would say, just on Chuck Schumer, the president.
What you see there, you could see Trump, I guess, mouthing the words, "It's true," during this, which is great. Trump, that's a callback to Trump used to call Chuck Schumer a Palestinian because he was against Israel and I guess supportive of Hamas. And he's got this way with the nicknames and the jokes, and it's just great branding. And I had forgotten that one, and I'm glad that the vice president brought it up. All right, that's today's show. Thanks to everyone for subscribing, leaving 5-star reviews, leaving comments, sharing your favorite clips that I post on social media with friends and family. And all that's really meaningful, and the show's doing great. And I got some big announcements to come about the future growth of the show. So that's all happening. Support the sponsors. It's all good too. And don't forget to come back tomorrow for the Tom Homan interview, which you will not want to miss. And I got a feeling you might not be able to miss it. It's going to be that good. It's going to be that big. All right. Thanks, everyone. Oh, we got Harry and Marcus producing the shows all week for us. So thanks, guys. John Cassio pulls clips. And that's it. Thanks for listening and watching.
He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow. And this is The Alex Marlow Show.